Alright, welcome. This is Chapter 4, Making Decisions for C#. In this video series, we're going to go through the exercises that are covered in Chapter 4, and we're going to start off with talking about decision structures and different syntax that we can use to do that. We start off with the if statement. We then progress with an if-else, look at other questions and how they can be answered using nested decision structures, logical operators, Boolean variables and flags, etc., as you can read through here. This particular chapter is quite long, and I have broken it down into 2 separate weeks in the course because there's a lot involved here, and we want to make sure that you have a really firm knowledge of decision structures. This is one of the topics that a lot of people want students to have, is the ability to logically reason out conditions, questions, and then direct program flow. And this concept flows into virtually every programming language ever written because it's a fundamental concept. As we work with a programming language, there's going to be times where we're going to be having user input, and based on that input, different decisions have to be made. So that's really the focus behind Chapter 4 as we progress. Now, looking at decision structures, we've got what they sometimes call them control structures, which is just a logical design, the design that controls the order in which statements are executed. And then we have what they call a sequence structure, which is just a step-by-step kind of set of instructions that execute in a very specific order that we've coded them. The decision structure, and sometimes it's also referred to as a selection structure, because you're going to be selecting maybe the code that needs to be executed based on the input. The decision structure executes statements only under a certain situation. So based on what the input the computer has, you can tell it what you want it to do. So here's a typical type of example of how the logic flow of a simple decision structure might work. And over here on the right hand side, we've got a flow chart. The diamond symbol actually represents that a decision has to be made. And in this case, the data flow would be something like a question was asked, possibly is it cold outside? And if the input value was, let's say, cold, and we're testing for that, that's the expression that we want to evaluate. So we're going to say if it answers then as cold, then, and that's true, it is cold outside, let's say, then we want to redirect the program flow and output. So the rectangular box here represents in a flowchart either an input or output value. So it'll come back, it'll tell us, oh, you should wear a coat because it's cold out. And that's a single decision that gets made. So only if, for example, the expression says, it's cold, then would it output that type of result. So this is a very basic decision structure that we're going to look at. And when you look at this in C#, the syntax reads as right here. If, and then in brackets, we've got an expression, and that expression has to be what they refer to as a Boolean expression, and that just means that the expression is it true or is it false? Is it 1 or is it 0? So if the expression is true, then perform what's in the braces, so that it'll perform that block of statements. So in the example here is if the expression here might read, if this was actually, the question was, is it equal to cold? That would be either true or false. So if it's true, we wear a coat. If it's false, we just carry on with the execution of the program. So the if statement, and this is really a fundamental block of code right here that we're going to be using throughout this course. And it's really not that difficult if we just think about it in a logical way. If it's cold out, then write out a statement that would say, wear a coat. All right. So to do that, we're going to have to look at rational operators and relational operators. So a relational operator is basically a symbol that represents whether your question is either greater or less than, or greater and equal to, or less than or equal to, or exactly equal to, or just not equal to at all. This is pretty standard. A lot of you have done this in math and in grade school. So we'll be looking at how to formulate relational operators and expressions in the next video.